Good afternoon and welcome to the Sun Theater. Thanks for joining us for our third quarter Power Lunch series. You guys, if you've been to any of Jake Fairley's talks in the past, you know you're in for a treat today. He's here to talk to us about agriculture and its connection to our business community and what it means to each and every one of you, whether you realize it or not. He is sponsored today by the Chamber's Ag Committee. Glad to bring an ag sponsor or ag speaker to the stage for you. And your lunch was by Small Blessings, so if you enjoyed it, be sure to give them a shout out. And I'm gonna bring Jake to the stage. Jake is a dad, husband, son, farmer, rancher, business person, all of those things. And on top of that, he's a great presenter and he's got some awesome information for you today. So let me introduce you to Jake Fairley and help me welcome him up here.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Definitely appreciate the Chamber doing this sort of thing, and I think it's been really fun, been a positive experience. So I would like to start off by wishing you guys good luck. You're going to need it more than I am. So yeah, what does it matter anyway? That's what I decided to title this presentation because oftentimes there's things that we maybe understand, we kind of intuitively know it, but we don't necessarily pay attention to how it affects our daily lives. And there's times that I wonder if ag is not that way a little bit. So how do you describe Gothenburg to others? If you're traveling out of town, out of state, somewhere where people don't necessarily know what we're about, how do you describe that to them? And once you're done, you know, telling them about the great people that live here and what a good town it is and some of your favorite things, they will inevitably ask a question like, well, what do people do there? And what is your answer to that? You know, are we a farm town? You know, what businesses does agriculture impact here? You know, if I were to ask you that question, you'd say, well, you know, John Deere and Frito-Lay and Co-op and the feed store. And those absolutely are affected, but what about Sander Furniture and 5-Star Flooring and Punt Express Chevrolet? Do they get impacted in the same way as some of the other businesses? And then how does the overall health of the ag industry affect Gothenburg? So those are a few things we're going to kind of look at today. Just show of hands, does anybody remember being there that day? No? Okay, I thought maybe a few of you had been. What's that? Yeah, right. So that was circa 1916. Yeah, 1916, I think, and was when that happened. So, all right. So, what is currently going on in production ag? And you guys are going to be familiar with this sort of thing and some of the things that we're facing. It's the same in about any industry, your own personal life, anything like that. But there's extended lead times on things right now. Products that used to take a week to get now take 2 weeks. Certain items are just unavailable. You probably know that if you tried to buy a part for a vehicle or anything like that. There's just certain things that we just can't even get right now. Obviously, we're fighting a drought. That is why I included that picture. That was like the one time it rained this spring. And that was from this year, early this spring. So it was nice to remember what water looked like, so I put that on there. Obviously, there is high input costs, various things that we need to make our world go around, fuel, fertilizer, seed, feed, all that sort of thing. And then climbing interest rates, which obviously they are not bad yet, especially if you go back to like the 80s and use that as a benchmark, but they have increased, you know, 1% to 2% in a short amount of time for operating expense and that sort of thing. So we are dealing with that. Now, it's not all gloom and doom. There's strong demand for our products. That's a good thing. And there's favorable commodity prices. So it's not all bad. That is just kind of what's going on today. All right, so I want to talk about some production costs first and just what it takes in the ag world. Specifically today, we're going to talk about the livestock sector. We did crops last year. We're going to do livestock today. But I kind of want you to understand a little bit what makes our world go around so that then you can understand, you know, how that affects Gothenburg, right? So, all right, in 2021, you've all seen a round bale of hay, driving down the road, guys out baling hay. So those particular bales on that truck, in 2021, they were worth about, you know, somewhere around in the neighborhood of $87 a bale. And in 2022, that exact same hay is now worth $130 a bale. And so that entire truckload sitting in the field like that is almost $1,300 more this year than it was a year ago. Okay, that's great, but what does that actually mean for a guy that's trying to raise a calf crop or something like that? Well, the cost to feed one cow eating 30 pounds of that hay a day. Now, keep in mind that there's other things in the ration. You're probably not just feeding straight hay. This time of year, we're lucky enough, a lot of cows are out to pasture yet. At some point in the fall, they'll come to corn stalks. So, there's some other feeds that are kind of working around in there, but at some point, you usually end up feeding hay. Unfortunately, there's some guys starting that already now because of the drought. As pasture conditions decline, they're going to feed more hay till corn stalks open up. If you have a hard winter, you're going to feed a lot of hay and that sort of thing. But if she was just eating that hay, it costs 89 cents a day, all right, to feed her. Well, that doesn't sound terrible, or it has increased by 89 cents a day. Which does not sound terrible, except to feed 200 cows, it costs $178 more this year than it did at the same time last year. And that total grocery bill comes out to $538 a day to feed 200 cows that truckload of hay that's sitting there. So, calf prices are good. Calf prices are favorable right now. They have to be to support what else we have going on. So, what does it cost to actually grow the hay? And you can argue with me if that is too much, not enough for rent, but I put it at $250 an acre if you were going to go out and rent a piece of valley ground. You might actually end up paying $300 or $350, but that's what I used for this example today. Your initial cost to put that hay in, and that includes seed, fertilizer, herbicide, but also all the prep work, so disking, packing, drilling, and all that sort of thing that goes along with it. You're looking at $305 an acre to establish that hay the first year. Now, we typically plan for that to be a 4 to a 5, some guys stretch it to 6 years of hay production, so you can average that out, but your upfront cost is still going to be that $300. But anyway, that comes out to about $61 an acre for the life of that hay field. Okay, so we got it planted, we have it established. We're going to go for a goal of about 7 tons of alfalfa an acre. It's irrigated, and so we're going to plan on putting on an additional 18 inches of water per acre through the pivot. And when we do that, the cost of the field operation, so I included irrigating in that, also swathing, baling, and that sort of thing, any of the field operations that go along with that, you come out to $291 per acre per year to get that hay put up as far as the actual activity goes. Then you also need herbicide to keep the weeds out of it, fertilizer in order to push your yield potential. You're going to need net wrap to put on the bale and all that sort of thing. So when you add all those up, you end up with another $103 an acre per year. And so your total cost is $105 per ton if that field does what you want it to do, and that is just cash price, right? So that doesn't have any interest on the money or any opportunity cost taken out of it. It costs you $105 a ton. So if you're selling a truckload of alfalfa this year for, maybe $160 a ton, I mean, that sounds like a pretty good profit margin, but in reality, you profited somewhere in the neighborhood of $55 a ton, which is not bad, but there is a lot of time and labor and effort put into getting that hay put up in a good, good quality bale. So that's kind of what we're looking at for hay production. All right, so why are we growing all this hay to begin with? Well, because in this part of the world, there's a lot of feedlots. There's also a lot of cow-calf operations. A lot of the producers that I deal with are cow-calf guys, and that is our whole goal, is to bring a good calf to market. So in order to do that, you need to take care of the cow. Winter, deep snow, inclement weather, any of that kind of stuff. We're obviously feeding hay, and in a lot of cases, you're feeding that calf some hay as well. So this past weekend, we weaned a bunch of calves. Pasture's getting short. We think if we pull the calves off, we're moving them to a new pasture. We're pretty certain the cows can make it there until corn stalks open up. So those calves are going to come home, they're going to get put on a ration in the corral, and we're going to feed them. The numbers don't work to feed the calf through the cow when you're in a tough environment like we are this year. And so that hay is going to go to feed the cow, it's going to go to feed the calf, and that's why we're making it. All right, so how much does it take, or what is it worth, I guess? What is that calf actually worth? So as an example, this year, let's say that we're going to market a 550-pound steer calf, and our market window is going to be late November. That's when we're going to try to get them there. And at some point this year, you could have locked in about $2 per pound on that calf, which makes that calf approximately $1,100, but that's gross dollars. That's not taking into consideration, you know, what it took to get the calf to that point in time. I think maybe you could have done a little better than that for a short period of time. Prices have dropped a little bit, but you can still market them fairly well now. So roughly $1,100 steer calf. Okay, so what does it cost to actually raise that calf? Well, I mean, just your straight up cash out of pocket, you're looking at somewhere around $725 per calf. And that includes feed costs, veterinarian costs, time and labor. But this does not include any overhead. So that doesn't count a tractor that you may need to hay or feed them with. It doesn't count a pickup truck to drive around and check them, a horse trailer to haul them to the sale barn, no pens, no corrals, no lots, nothing like that. And it also does not count any brood cows. And the reason I did it that way was because it differs so much from operation to operation. If I have a cow herd and all my mama cows are already paid for, then that looks a lot different than if I still have a note at the bank and I'm paying on some of those cows. Likewise with the tractor. If I have a farming operation and actually the row crop side is paying for the tractor, but it lets the cow side borrow it in the off season, you know, that may look different than if you're trying to justify that tractor with nothing but the cows. So $725 per calf, but you could stretch that $200 more than that, I think, fairly easily. I mean, you could be talking $9 to $950, depending on what all else you want to figure into that, right? So, you know, at $400 profit, we'll call it profit, you know, 100 head of cows is calves that you're taking to sale is $40,000, but that is not going to be realistic in this setting. You know, that 100 head of calves, and keep in mind that would have to be all steer calves. Heifer calves aren't worth quite as much. So in reality, you're probably talking, you know, 100 head of calves, you're maybe going to bring home $10,000, $15,000 cleared on that. So while commodity prices are strong, input cost is eating a big chunk out of that margin. And it right now it's no different for the row crop guys either, right? So $7 corn sounds fantastic, and it is, but we're paying $7 inputs to go along with it. And you know, if you go back to the first time corn went to $3, you know, those guys were probably making as much or more money then than we are now in a $7 world. And part of what is doing this is inflation, right? So we know at the moment we're living in some accelerated inflation, and our best bet is that our commodity prices actually outrun the price of the inputs, which they do to some point, and then at some point that levels off. And it wouldn't really matter if you were selling $1,000 calves or $500 calves, or if you were selling $7 corn or $3 corn. At some point the inputs match, you know, kind of where your output is going to be, and we sort of all end up making the same amount of money anyway. So at some point we try to outrun it enough that you can put a little in the bank and have a little cushion, so when things go the other way, commodity price drops, it does take a while for input price to even out to that, to follow that, and so you could be inverted for a while. And so $7 corn's great, $1,100 calves are great, but there's a little more under the surface, I guess. So how does all of that affect Gothenburg? So when I asked earlier what businesses rely on farmers and ranchers as customers, I mean, we're going to do a little group participation here. What businesses in town do you think are impacted? Like, and nothing like John Deere Co-op feed store, but let's hear some other ones. Which other businesses do you think are impacted by that?
All of them.
All of them. That's a cheap answer.
Okay.
But thank you for that. Yeah. No, you're right. No, you are right. And here is why that happens, right? So as somebody involved in production ag, And we're sitting around in the house one night, and the couch is like on its last leg, right? And you go to put the footstool out, and it falls off, and my youngest is jumping all over it and spreading Cheeto dust on the cushions, and maybe the cat tore a hole in it. And it's like, man, we need to update the couch, right? Well, we can't because we don't have any money. So we sit on that same old wore out couch. But at some point, when things turn around, or we have a good year and we make a little extra money, and we finally say, okay, we can update that couch now. And so we go down to Sander Furniture and we buy a new couch. And I would argue that if you went and talked to people like Five Star, like Sander, they're going to tell you when the ag economy is doing well, they're probably doing more business because people feel like they have a little extra disposable income to maybe update some things in and around the house that they may not otherwise. Same way with Pony Express. They're always going to sell a certain amount of pickups, but rancher's driving the same pickup for 10 years, and then maybe he gets the cows paid off, and he has a couple good years, and the calf crop is good, and he decides, it's time for a new pickup. He's going to go down and talk to them folks and, maybe update pickups, right? Where he may not if things continue tough. Well, we'll put another few dollars in it and keep driving this pickup. So the health of the ag economy and how producers are doing on a level definitely does impact how other businesses in Gothenburg are doing as well. So part of the reason that is important is because approximately 70 cents out of every dollar spent stays local. So if I come into town and I spend that money at any of those businesses, and it could be a number of different businesses, certainly, the flower shop, different stores downtown, any place that is selling something that I maybe don't necessarily have to buy, but I would like to have, 70 cents of that is going to stay right here locally, because I go give Troy Dom $1 to put some flooring in my house, and then he takes that $1 and he says, I really need to update a pickup for my store, so he goes down to Pony, and he buys a pickup, and then Gary takes that $1, like, well, I'd really like some steaks tonight, so he goes over to Peterson's and, buys a steak, and that $1 keeps making it around the town of Gothenburg. So how many times does it make it around? Well, quite a few. You can see how at some point Peterson says, okay, well now, we have to pay the electric bill to run the store, so they take it to the municipality plant and they pay their bill, and that $1 keeps making it around town. So if I go and I spend that money in Gothenburg, how does that allow other businesses, to expand and to invest in Gothenburg? Well, if times are tough, it's like any other operation. Any of those businesses are going to try to cut back and manage their expenses. But if they're doing really well, maybe they see an opportunity for more sales. Maybe that allows them to hire another sales guy, right? So you can employ another person. Maybe that is actually bringing somebody to town, or just employing somebody in a different capacity. But it allows them to grow their business, and as they do that, it's a snowball effect. They sell more goods and services, there's more sales tax collected, there's more revenue for Gothenburg. Just as time goes on, all those dollars getting spent here, definitely multiply as they go out through the community. Okay, so this is a big scary slide, but and there's a lot of information on it, but it is kind of important, and I wanted to hit on it. So they did a study at Penn State and the American Farmland Trust. They did it together, and they consistently find that agricultural land provides more income, more revenue back to local government, school districts, etc., than does the residential counterpart, which makes sense, right? Like if I have 100 acres, how often do I need the police to drive by? I don't really need city water, I don't need city electricity, all that sort of thing. But if you took 100 acres of town and the population is much more dense, they need more goods and services there, it stands to reason, right? So as you, as farmland, ranch land pays taxes, it does help alleviate how much residential taxes would be if they were having to make up all that difference by themselves. So we hear it talked about a lot, but ag land, and let's just say it's valued at $4,500, which is a rough average for Dawson County. That's what it's evaluated at, not what it's worth. You could sell that ground for maybe $8,000, but for tax purposes, that's where it's valued. And right now, I think in 2007, they started taxing ag land at 75% of its value. And so we're going to tax it at 75% of its assessed value, and it's going to be $1.915316 per $100 of value. And so if you do all the math on that, it's about $64 per acre of tax revenue that's going to come into the local area based on that farm ground. So if you took a full quarter, which is 160 acres, you valued it across the board, and you taxed it all the same, it's about $10,000 worth of revenue that's going to come into the area based on those taxes. I figured it out this morning. In order to bring the same amount of revenue that a quarter of farm ground would bring, you'd have to have a house valued between $500,000 and $600,000 in order to produce the same amount of tax revenue that a quarter of ground. Okay, so in rural Nebraska, approximately, and really probably for all Nebraska, but certainly in rural Nebraska, approximately 55% of property tax actually goes to fund public schools, and then the remainder of it goes to things such as law enforcement, municipalities, public infrastructure, law enforcement, and that sort of thing, firefighting. So as you can see, okay, so what does it matter to Gothenburg? Well, if we believe in education and we believe in investing in our kids' future, then as we bring that money in, it allows us to hire more teachers, hire better teachers, update technology, or whatever it is that the goal of the school is at that time. It allows us to do a few things that we may not be able to do otherwise, which directly comes back to impact Gothenburg if we're trying to bring some of our hometown kids back at some point. All right, so what are some ways then that you can support agriculture? Because I understand as you're sitting there, you think, well, that's all well and good. I'd like to do something to help, but what is it? What's that look like? I mean, there's not a lot of people that need 10,000 bushels of corn. Like, I'd like to do that, but what am I going to do with it anyway, right? By the same token, some people need a half a beef, some people need a whole beef. Probably nobody needs an entire pen of finished steers, right? So some ways that you can help support local producers is by buying products that are grown or processed as locally, and that may be regionally, as possible, right? So when you go to the store and you have a demand for Nebraska grown beef, and if that's what Petersons are selling, and there's more demand for that, they will keep bringing more of that in. Same way if you're buying honey that is produced locally, or if you're using ethanol. So you go out to Blake's Fast Fuel, you put some ethanol in, that is generating a demand for the corn that's grown right here, locally. Same way, I'm not specifically advertising it, but the Old Depot is a pretty good place if you want to go support a local vineyard and winery and see what they're doing, which is agriculture also. I mean, they are absolutely involved in agriculture. They're, serving beef out there. They're serving wine that was grown. I mean, it couldn't get any more locally. They're growing it out back, right? The grapes, not the wine. You can't go pick a bottle of wine. It'd be easier if you could, but that's not how it works. Maybe have Jason come in and explain that at your next one, right, how that happens. But those are all absolutely ways that you can support your local producers, right? And you can also go and talk to people such as the Nebraska Department of Ag, the director there, Steve Wellman, and let him know that we are a global force right here in Nebraska. We make products here that get exported to other countries, and put some, not really pressure on them, but just let them know that, hey, we want to stand behind our producers here in Nebraska. Keep doing what you're doing to drum up demand for that. And then also be an informed voter. And this, I'm not making this political at all, and I'm not going to tell you how you should or shouldn't vote, but just please be informed about issues, especially if it is something that is going to directly determine how tax dollars are spent. Do some research, find out what good it is going to do in your community, find out where the funding is going to come from, and then just go vote. And however you feel about that is fine, but don't just roll in and like, whoops, I forgot, issue 13, just check a box, because that ultimately can make a big difference in, how our taxes get spent, but also how they get collected, right? So just make sure you're informed about issues that are going on and how and where that money's coming from. All right, so I asked you before, why does it matter? Well, it matters because we're all part of a community and we're all tied together, and we need all of us to succeed. Like if John Deere goes out of business, not that they would, but if Landmark closed the doors, that does take away something that I need in order to do what I need to do. I need to be able to come to town, buy parts, buy equipment, buy a service from somebody local. And so it does matter. You know, if the Sun Theater goes out of business because people aren't supporting it, well, now I have no means of entertainment or, you know, anything like that where I would like to come here and spend a couple of dollars and bring the family out. So we're all in a community together, and the ag industry is no different, right? So agriculture supplies a large amount of capital and cash flow into small communities. You know, we talked about that a little bit ago, just the influx of cash that is coming in to the area because, you know, farmers and ranchers are customers of products that aren't necessarily tied to the ag industry. I mean, we need all sorts of stuff that we can't make or produce, but the living that we make provides us with that capital to be able to come to town and do something with it. So I think that is why it's important. So, is Gothenburg a farm town? I mean, what do you guys think? And maybe you wouldn't describe it that way. I would, because that's who I am and how I talk. But, you know, maybe as the divide grows deeper between, you know, our city cousins, that starts to sound maybe a little bit negative, you know, like we're maybe a bunch of hillbillies. And if there's any hillbillies out there, you're some of my favorite people, so don't take offense to that. But we have running water, right? You know, and we have a good school system, and we have internet. You know, we have things that other people in bigger cities have. Maybe we're not necessarily a farm town as we are a rural community that depends heavily on agriculture, right? That's probably how I would describe it. If I was talking to somebody who had no idea what farming was, and believe it or not, like there are people out there who don't have any idea. And you think, yeah, well, I mean, they live in, you know, LA or New York, but it would scare you to death if you knew the amount of people in Kearney that don't understand where their food comes from. And so to tie that back, I guess that's another really good way that you can support the ag industry is by talking about what's going on in your local community. And you don't have to know the ins and the outs and how you grow corn or that you pick it with a S780 combine or any of that kind of stuff. But to just know that, yeah, we do grow corn here and it does get turned into ethanol or it does get fed to cattle that turn into beef that we sell, you know, from here. And to just be able to, be an advocate for something that is going on, you know, in your local community. So, some interesting facts. Nebraska exports approximately $1.9 billion in soybean products. That's whole soybeans, soybean meal, oil, any of that kind of thing. And if you want to look any of this up, nada.nebraska.gov's got a lot of that information on it. And kind of a neat website, you can go poke around. But 1.85 billion in corn, 1.67 billion in beef. I think that's actually closer to maybe 1.8 this year, or in 21, I guess, maybe. And then like 3.2 million in pork. As you can see, there is a lot of dollar value in products that we grow, and that is here in Nebraska, that is getting exported to other parts of the world, right? And some of our major, I guess we're going to call them customers for the sake of this, Mexico, Canada, Japan, Korea, China, in that order. You know, which makes sense. You know, Canada and Mexico freight is a little bit easier. Farms and ranches utilize about 45 million acres of land in Nebraska. 45 million acres, that's a lot of territory that is going to production ag. And out of that, I think about 22 million of it is range and pasture land, so about another 22 or 23 million is farm ground. And then out of that, about 32% or so of that is irrigated farm ground. You know, we think everything is irrigated because we drive through the valley here and there's pivots everywhere, but you know, if you go north or south very far, you actually get out of that. There is a lot of dry land production around. So they found that in the year 2020, every dollar in agricultural exports generated $1.03 in economic activities such as transportation, financing, warehousing, production, which makes sense. You know, with what it costs to raise a crop, to bring calves to market, to do whatever it is you're going to do, it is almost impossible to do that out of pocket. And so we go see, you know, somebody at the bank, you know, a financing institution or whatever it is to get operating notes or to get a loan to buy a piece of equipment. You know, the days of going down to the local tractor dealership and buying a tractor, you know, like when the M come out or whatever, if it was $800 and you save some for a down payment and then maybe the dealership financed the rest in a year or two you hadn't paid for, you know, those kind of days are over when you're talking about going and buying a combine that's $500,000. So you go to the bank and you borrow the money, you know, the bank in turn has the ability to invest in the town of Gothenburg as well. So it helps further that. You know, as far as transportation, I mean, all you have to do is take a trip down I-80 to see the amount of trucks that are on the road anymore. And there's a lot of truck transportation that happens. In fact, there's even more truck transportation that should happen because we're kind of running into that right now. If you go clear back to shipping delays earlier in the presentation. Well, I guess that's, what do you guys, when you go to the store and you notice that something has went up substantially in price, what do you attribute that to? You know, a lot of times it's easy to say, well, you know, farmers just getting paid more money or, you know, whatever it is. And I'm not saying that you guys say that, but I think in some parts of the country that maybe is the philosophy, but you know, there's a lot of things that go into the production and processing of that, shipping of that, and that sort of thing. And so transportation is no different. And not that it works this way, but just a fun example. I was figuring this out the other day. Let's say that you really had a thing for ribeye steaks, right? And you want Nebraska ground beef, so I don't blame you for that because it is the best that you're ever going to find in the world. But let's say that you liked it so much that you wanted 25 tons of ribeyes, right? And so you went to a distributor and you sourced those 25. Maybe you run a restaurant or have a grocery store, or you just maybe really like ribeyes, right? So you get 25 tons of ribeyes, and then let's say the distributor is in Lincoln, and so the freight on that, and let's say they're a good steak. Let's say they weigh a pound each before you cook them, and so you ship those in a semi to your location here in Gothenburg, and you're somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 or 3 cents per steak is what it costs in freight to get it here. Because right now you're looking somewhere $5 to maybe $5.50 a loaded mile on freight from Lincoln into Gothenburg. And you think to yourself, man, 2 or 3 cents a steak? Like, yeah, I do that all day. Like, why wouldn't I do that? But when you start looking at it on a larger quantity, and so if I'm selling mineral and I'm getting 25 tons of mineral in, because there's not as many bags of mineral in 25 tons as there are 1 pound steaks in 25 tons. Our freight and transportation has added $1 to each bag of mineral that's coming into the feed store. When you're talking about a product that maybe only costs like $22 to begin with, that's a pretty substantial increase, right? And that's the freight for me. That's what I'm covering to get it into the store. And so there's a lot of cost associated with that. So now if you think maybe you are a wholesaler and maybe you are dealing in that quantity of meat, like every ton of that is coming in is costing you, $40 in freight, where maybe a couple years ago it was actually only costing you $20. And so it's because of the quantity of scale that it keeps adding and adding and adding to overall cost of things, right? So anyway, that's just something that is kind of interesting, I guess, to me. So, all right. I guess this is your guys' opportunity to ask questions or comments, whatever you want to talk about.
So you have a minute to think about it while I get up here.
Oh, time's up. Thanks for coming.
Okay. First of all, have you enjoyed all of the information and the details that we've been hearing from Jake today? I am always so fascinated. Last time he was here, and then again this time, the kinds of details and facts and numbers that I just don't know, and things that happen out there in the ag world that really are impacting us that I had no idea. So let's hear some questions that you might have. Is there anything that he mentioned today that you have inquiring minds about, or other things you'd like to ask?
Must have been awfully thorough.
Very thorough.
Or way too many numbers and it didn't really sink in.
Yeah. Did I see somebody down here? No? Okay. The lights are bright, so it's hard to see. I have a question for you.
Sure.
I was sitting back there, I work at Gothenburg Health, and I was wondering how you feel like the ag industry impacts the healthcare industry.
Yeah. So in my almost 40 years of existence, most of the time when I spend money for healthcare is because I had an accident doing something related to agriculture. So that impacts it a fair amount, I guess, right there. Yeah, actually, to your point, I think it probably has a pretty big impact on it from the standpoint of, I don't know what the customer base is, but there's probably as many rural people coming to Gothenburg for healthcare services as there are, residents of Gothenburg in town, right? So I think just patient base is probably big enough that impacts it directly, and then I guess the ability to be able to come here and get procedures or services and not have to travel to Omaha or wherever it may be to get that done. I mean, for one, it keeps at least some of those dollars local, and so yeah, I think there's a pretty decent correlation there.
Well, and I thought it was fascinating, you mentioned 70 cents on every dollar. It kind of circles back around. So even if not directly, that's an example of ways that we might support another business owner that then eventually needs some health service, et cetera. So I think we're all interconnected, and that's the piece I think is so interesting.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, like it or not, as we gain more experience in life, we tend to need more, medical procedures done and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, just being able to have a place locally to spend those dollars, because at some point when it comes to your health, you're going to take care of it wherever you have to go. So if we can take care of it here in Gothenburg, keep some of those dollars local.
Sounds great. What about other questions that might have popped up in your minds while I was talking? Anybody have one? Okay, I have one more, and it relates to the last time when you were talking about some of the prices and specific with the grains and the crops and that kind of stuff. I said, how could we support the ag industry, the farmers, what can we do? And this time I'm thinking, I loved how you said that we could, buy the beef. Obviously that's a great idea. Go to the Old Depot, which is one of my favorites as well. But I'm just wondering, just as community members, how can we support you all during these different seasons and ups and downs?
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends. I mean, if you want to buy me lunch, that makes me feel good about life, and or a cup of coffee, or something. I guess if you're looking outside of monetary ways to support, when you're out and about, whether that's a ball game on, Friday night or church on Sunday, or you just see somebody at a business in town or whatever who is a producer, just, hey, I know there's certain things that are tough right now, but we do really appreciate what you're doing. You'd be surprised how far that goes. It's interesting because on social media, and people are so much braver on social media, they'll say anything on the internet that they may not ever say face to face. Sometimes we sort of get villainized, I guess, in production ag on that sort of thing. And some of it is just misinformation. Some of it may have been something that was true in the past, but like anything, we've evolved and we've done better, we do better now. But, I guess farmers and ranchers tend to get beat up a fair amount in a social setting that way. So just knowing that we have your support means a lot. I mean, that goes a long way to just somebody appreciates what we're doing, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's good. Yes?
In response to that question, Jake, your comment, I know a few years ago when the youth group at the Presbyterian Church was meeting on Wednesday evenings and having meals, they would have leftover food, and they would take, during harvest when all the trucks were lining up there, and they would take them out and offer to them.
Yeah.
And I think there's things like that church communities, that groups can do, that it's super easy.
Yeah.
But I think it goes a long way. That's just one example that triggered my memory when you were talking about that.
Yeah, no, stuff like that is absolutely a fantastic idea, and don't underestimate how big a small gesture can be.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't, it doesn't have to be a big grand, just a sandwich that somebody else made always tastes better than one you had to make yourself. So things like that, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Jake. This has been very informative. If you have questions, feel free to come up and visit with him individually. Also, please come back in November. I believe it's November 9th. We are going to be having some speakers from First State Bank talk to us about online currencies and kind of some of those different things that are out there besides just good old cash, and how we can make sure we're knowledgeable about that. So come back in November, invite a friend. Again, thanks for participating with Power Lunch, and thanks to Small Blessings for providing our lunch, and also to the Ag Committee for sponsoring this presentation. So let's give him one more round of applause.